Cool. We'll get rolling. James, thank you for joining. I don't think you need an introduction, but I'll still give you a mini version. Co-founder, co-CEO of PostHog, started the company in 2020. You guys are ish 90 people according to LinkedIn. You
Yeah, I
raised a
think we're about
series.
110, 120 now, something
There
like
you
that.
go. Some people don't want to admit that they work at PostHog apparently on LinkedIn. And you help developers build successful products. Um, Anything you would amend or change or add there?
Not really. No, we provide tons of tools in one. Like we try and provide everything you need to understand your users, ship new features, make money off your customers, look after them properly, and so on. So yeah, we're trying to build kind of as many products as we can. And nowadays we're also trying to automate everything with AI at the same time.
There you go. All right, letting more people in. Don Dresser drives engagement. All right, I have a bunch of questions for James, but if you guys probably joined for a reason, so if you have a question, just drop them in the chat. I'll try to include that in the conversation. Otherwise, we'll do a little Q&A at the end. But definitely be selfish with whatever, problem you have in your startup or whatever you're building so that James can troubleshoot here. James, in June 2024, so exactly a year ago, you said that you maxed out at two children. Is that still the
Yeah,
correct assessment, or are you planning?
100%. Yeah,
Yes.
two is too many.
Two,
So,
two is too many?
yeah, probably one was too many, but two didn't help the situation.
Okay. I'm at one, so maybe I should stay maxed out at this point and not add one more. Now, I read in your public handbook that the goal is to hit 100 million ARR by 2026. You probably cannot share if you're pacing on that goal, but when you think about it, I'm sure you studied other companies. What to you are some of the ingredients? What are maybe some necessary or sufficient requirements to build a 100 million ARR company?
Yeah, so we're actually ahead of schedule a little bit. Like I think we are, it's a slightly wild story. Like we set that goal when we're under 100K of revenue annually, I would say. Kind of just as like, hey, let's just set something big and see if we can track towards it. Somewhat miraculously, we've ended up going there. Like I think our current financial forecast is like 120 million for the end of next year. We're in the like mid 10
Wow.
rate range now. So there's still like a long way to go from where we are today, but our growth has been picking up quite a bit. We've learned a few ways to grow faster at more scale, which is cool. I think some of our early ideas worked well in the early, like, for example, we never had any account managers or salespeople. We had like two in total. But what we realized was we don't need to do outbound sales, but we should get better at like having a relationship with our customers. They tell us if
Mm.
they have problems, means our retention has climbed, which really drives as you get bigger, it gets really important to your growth that your customers stick around. I mean, it's important all the time, but it's particularly important when you have more customers that they stick around because I don't have to try and replace our whole customer base every 10 minutes or whatever. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, we're doing quite well on the growth side.
So if someone is trying to build a 100 million ARR company, because you probably studied other companies, what do you think are some of the ingredients?
So I think some of it is, I think one thing that's been really important to us is like knowing what you're doing and just like, so for, which sounds really stupid as thing to say, but like basically I think when you get like, what is this nature, like, are you trying to build a venture capital backed startup or are you trying to do something that is like a bootstrap company that you have more control over?
Hmm.
I think the thing we've done well is we're a VC backed company. We have a lot of like the values of a bootstrap company. I think in like the way we've operated historically and stuff, like we've been very close to being profitable for a lot of history. And but we are like our reality is where the thing we like doing is just going taking big swings and it's kind of just fun. And so our model is much more like, okay, we need to take like massive bets on what we can build. Like we kind of want to build the single most ambitious thing we can conceive of that is within reach to us, or like we think could be within reach, and then just going like really for it. So like the kind of framing internally will be like, how do we win in 10 years time? Sort of thing. It
Mm.
doesn't matter even if this doesn't feel like, like in the short run, we'll always refund customers who are annoyed, for example. But like, it's much more like, how do we make sure this customer is still using us in another year's time is much more our focus than how do we get as much money as we can out of them today. Um, so we've tried to have a very long-term view on like how do we build a business that's really successful over a very long time frame. And whereas if I were doing something more bootstrappy, um, like I've also run a bootstrap business. It actually belonged to someone else before, but I could just do whatever I wanted basically. and it was much more like, okay, no, there's a much tighter like cash constraint here. We need to be way more kind of more sensible in lots of ways and so on. But like, I think just kind of really leaning into what you actually are building is very important. Like, I think if the worst case scenario is like you're bootstrapping, but you act like a VC startup, or a VC backed and you act like you're bootstrapped. Those sort of then put you in this awkward middle ground. So we've just been willing to go, hey, you know what? Like, we should build every single tool that relates to customer data. Like, we're going to build a CRM, a support platform, like all of this stuff. We've got more ambitious as we've seen it starting to work over time. But the more ambitious we've gotten, the easier it is to get customers excited. It's like more marketable what we're working on. The easier it is to recruit a team because they're way more excited to work here, and it's way easier. We don't need to fundraise, but it makes it way easier to fundraise too. And so we'll often sometimes we fundraise because we don't have to, because then it's going to be really easy. Whereas it's nightmare mode if you have to fundraise. And we spent time at the start being much thriftier with our spending in order to get to the position where we then could fundraise more easily. So yeah, those are some of the like pointers I think early on that have
Long-term mindset I wrote down, you got to be ambitious. And I think one thing that you've previously also said, you actually have to have fun,
yeah.
because it just takes a long time to build a large company. So if you're not having fun, you're not stick around.
Yeah, I think everyone just assumes that businesses are boring, and are just quite conservative in general. Like the way they come across online as a result is like then kind of boring. And I don't know, like if like hey, I've got a downloadable white paper behind like that you have to put in your email address to receive. Like no one's going to want to do that. It makes you look really bored. Like so, just kind of being willing to take some risk with your like. I think most people over-index on the risk of looking interested of like
Mm.
screwing this up, whereas like the actual risk is like no one cares. That is like by such a long way the biggest risk that you're taking in an early stage startup is like no one has any attention for you because they're watching TikTok all day. And so you're not competing against, in my head, we're not really competing with like in marketing, we're not competing with B2B SaaS businesses. We're competing with TikTok or whatever else
Mm.
is on. And like we're competing with like the like Mr. Beast and all this stuff is actually who's taking attention away online. And so just acknowledging that like the risk is like no one cares. The risk is not really competitors. It's definitely not what other people might think of me putting weird crap on the internet or whatever. So yeah, just being like quite, you just have to like be willing to put yourself out there in some way direction. Like and the stronger you do it, the more polarizing it is, probably the more you'll get attention and growth because of that.
So, as an example, is your LinkedIn shit posting, is that like you just having fun and not caring? Is that an intentional way to try to kind of stand out and do something differently? Is it kind of an actual strategic marketing channel to you guys? Like, what is
Yeah.
that?
A bit of both. I mean, I kind of, it is just quite funny. I can't really tell if it, basically in the early days, I used to post on social media, for example, I would post what we're learning. I was like, what can I write that's useful? And what do I actually know anything about? And I'm like, well, I know about our own business. That's one thing I'm expert in. So I will just write what we've learned about like how we got our first customers or whatever.
Yeah.
And those posts always do quite well. There are a lot of energy to write them all the time, and there's quite a lot going on. And I was like, hang on a minute, like I can see other people who just post some stupid thing, and it just like gets 100,000 times, it gets 100 times more engagement. I was like, well, I can just do both at once. So if I'm getting busier, I just do more shit posting. So yeah, I do find it quite funny, but it does. I think it has helped the business quite a bit. And so yeah, I think for me, it's more. It's not like a game-changing thing for at this scale. It
Sure.
doesn't really. Yeah, it's really hard to know. It's like I think I might be like this is one thing where perhaps I'm doing it because I find it fun and I'm justifying it because I run a company. But I think it would work even from scratch. Like if you're trying to get from, it certainly gives enough traction that if you're like there are advantages we have that we're later stage, like we can just have lots of money to do things with. But like doing something like this is accessible to literally anyone on this call, and like you can certainly get some customers from just like being able to get attention on social media. It almost makes like less of a difference for us at this
Yeah.
scale than perhaps it would earlier on. So I think this is like a marketing channel that makes disproportionately a lot of sense early on for a lot of companies, maybe not all of them, but yeah. So I
So,
don't really know. Is the honest answer there.
so if a founder is listening and they want to get into shit posting, what would you recommend them as a first step?
Just start doing it. Like you just it has to be fun. You have to find it yourself funny what you're writing, and if you don't, then it won't work. So yeah, and like it's the ones that you don't really think through properly that do the best as well. So you can like way overthink this stuff. It's like
So
just
you
start
just
posting stuff.
literally think of them in the moment and then you write them, or do you actually be like, okay, I need to write a shit post today. Let me find something.
That's good. No, I do schedule them. I'll have like a train ride or something where I'm kind of bored, and I would just schedule a whole bunch of them and put them into buffers. And so we've got kind of so they will spread out a little bit. yeah, and now we're a bit bigger. Sometimes I'll get like our team to look at them too. Like they'll like edit them or whatever. But yeah, you can like start off with I was doing I was doing like all of the writing, all of the coaching, all of the editing and stuff. Later on, it's like I can have a bit more help, just saying like, hey, here's some like here's a bunch of them. Please schedule all these for me, blah blah blah, or like
There we
suggest some ideas,
go.
or whatever. But yeah,
Don said, I'm looking forward to the shitpost about rigorous shitpost scheduling.
true. Yeah,
Shitpost as a
that feels memeable.
service. Oh my God.
um,
There you go. Okay. Do you remember, was there a moment where you realized you have product market fit?
100%. So we actually like PostHog was the sixth thing we worked on. So we built five other companies for like companies, but like five other products first, all of which failed. We kind of just the vibe change really. It went from being like all of those companies, basically day to day, what it looked like was me and my co-founder Tim. He was just building our ideas as quickly as possible, and I was trying to get users to use them and talking to people. So I was like literally just, oh, I look like I'm just on LinkedIn or WhatsApp or whatever, just trying to convince people to like take a call so we could try and validate if our idea was going to be useful. Um, and it's very hard work. Like it's like pushing a rock up a hill, where I'm like, pretty much everyone's ignoring me because most of these ideas are pretty bad. Well, they all were bad. And it's really like I'm trying to get like I set myself a goal of like trying to get like 2 meetings a day booked. And I'll also do things like the website and a few other bits and pieces. And with PostHog, what wound up happening was, and some ideas got some traction. We made like a little bit of money, or like a
Hmm.
very small amount of money off some of them, like a few $100s MRR kind of thing. But with PostHog, what happened was we spent a month building the product. During that month, we were trying to get like early users onto like the very, very earliest versions of the product. Like after about a week, we probably had like the first real life user that was like a friend that was just like, hey, as a favor, this product's not going to work properly, but like we just want to build it in production with you, onto your
Hmm.
product, please. For a month, we've been on Hacker News, which is like a big, I guess most people are probably familiar. It's like a
Yep.
news website for developers that's very popular. And that was the day where I was like, this has just obviously worked. Like we got hundreds of upvotes and hundreds of probably like I can't remember how many people signed up. Just like a lot of people signed up on that day, and then literally since then, the whole lot's on a pull basis instead. Like I've never had to cold call, cold email, message anyone again proactively to get customers to show up. We've just had more and more growth. I think that, like in the first week after that, after the like initial buzz had died down from the post, I think we were getting maybe like 40, like 40 companies a week installing, like including like startups and hobbyists and things. None of them were paying anything. But it gave us like that little trickle of interest, which meant then we could listen to that user group and build and build and build. And we had like a better feedback cycle. And then gradually we built a pay product. And then like nowadays we sign up maybe like it's like thousands of companies a week at the moment, maybe 3,000 companies a week install PostDoc now or something
Do
like
you
that.
do you think that's you can extrapolate that to advice where I mean it sounds almost like you tried a bunch of ideas, they didn't work on day one, then you had idea number five that worked on day one, like you immediately had a poll, people wanted it. I mean, obviously there's stories where people work on the same idea, the same product for years, and it's just like a
Yeah.
grind, and eventually something works.
Yeah. So yeah, there absolutely were. Like I went to a talk, for example, by the founder of Airbnb, and that was sounded
Hmm.
very grindy. Like they just had this like incredible level of belief. But then when you look at the people behind Airbnb, they're very producty, very designy, and like those are not skills that I was good at in the.
Hmm.
Like, now I'm actually all right at these things, but I was like actively bad in the early days. And I think for us, I think basically like unless you already know that you're good at product, you're probably bad at product, which means that you will learn more by doing than by planning in advance. Like just and especially with coding going quicker. Like if you're building software, like so we averaged like those. It was actually the sixth thing we worked on was PostDog. We averaged one thing per month. So it took 6 months. Like we did not spend 6 years doing this because what would have happened if we'd spent 6 years doing this is we'd have quit because we'd have run out of money.
Right.
That's or like got bored or not bored, like sad. So yeah, I think that unless you know that you're insanely great at product based on evidence, I would assume you're poor. And then figure out a workaround for that, which is basically like is shipping velocity. And like so when we were building, it wasn't like, oh, we're trying to validate the idea. When the idea is validated, we shall build it. It was like, I will validate the idea because I'm less technical, I'm not very quick at coding stuff. My co-founder will go full guns blazing on shipping it. And so I'm trying to sort of validate it as we're going along. We're then putting like real product in front of these users to see if the early conversations actually match reality. Often they would not. The mum test is like quite a good book for this, but I think
Hmm.
it takes a false sense of security that you can just ask the perfect questions. Like you find out much more. Like the clearest lessons are from putting it in people's hands. I only think you can validate to like, maybe it's like if you something's, if it's like 50-50 start off with, perhaps exceptionally good validation puts you at like a 55% chance of being
Yeah.
right or something. Like I don't think it's game changing. I don't think anyone's truly great at that.
Varun asks, how complete was your product when you launched and started getting traction? Were you selling the roadmap or the feature that was in production at that moment?
So we did a pretty good job. Like there was like a level of usefulness that the product had. So for example, we built just product analytics as our first product. It was self-hostable, which was like a key different thing. Like no one else really offered self-hosted product analytics. We had like SDKs to let you grab event data out of your own product into us. You could draw graphs of usage and stuff. And there were like and there's like a lot of documentation and like we had like a reasonably good website. Everything was fully documented. Um, so it was like a functioning product, but it wouldn't have worked at scale. So if someone had like a lots of users, like we're just using Postgres as a database rather than ClickHouse. So um, you could have like, if you had like 1,000 users, it would be fine. But if you had like 1 million users, it absolutely would not work. We were charging nothing for it. Again, that's probably something I would change. Like I would have charged a little bit sooner.
Oh,
Some of the roadmap stuff though was also interesting. Like we used this whole story actually around the pricing thing that might be worth talking about for a moment.
sure. Yeah, go for it.
So we were building something open source. I basically think that's like an interesting thing with pricing in general, where the more competitive your industry is, and the more validation there is that other people have charged successfully. You're basically, if your competitors are making a ton of money doing kind of the same thing as you're going to like hopefully if you can get usage, you will end up making money. Basically, is my
Hmm.
theory. If no one is doing your thing, I it's like much more likely that no one will pay for it. And because like no one has figured this, you haven't got any proof that anyone's going to pay anything. And a lot of our early ideas were all new concepts that didn't have any didn't feel like they had direct competition. And as a result, they're really hard to monetize. And so all of those things we tried to monetize sooner. With PostHog, we're like, well, we're doing product analytics. The spin is that it's like open source and self-hosted. Thus, I think we'll crack revenue if we can just get people to use this thing because I can see like multiple other $100 million run rate companies building product analytics. Our challenge is to stand out. And we have this one hypothesis that companies need to self-host. Turned out not to be the most important thing to our business at all later on in our growth. But back then that gave us enough of a user base to be able to then work with them to build something in what ended up being very different. And now we're multi-product, we have 14 products, we're cloud-based and so on. But yeah, pricing, I think it's like, and proof does not mean like there's startups that have raised lots of money. It is
Yeah.
like, no, there are businesses that have actual traction that are like public or whatever, where they have revenue that's significant, not like $1 million a year or something, but like 100 million plus kind of thing. And so we took some risk with not commercializing, not charging for it super early. Um, but that was quite a calculated risk, I would say, and like not universally good advice.
So the heuristic is if there is proof that people are willing to pay for such a solution, then you can go open source longer. If you're not sure whether anyone would even ever pay for this, you should charge for it sooner to actually validate what. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. So to give it like an example, like Docker,
Yeah.
like everyone in engineering uses Docker or has used it. Um, I think they found the commercial side they're now actually really successful, but super later on. But they kind of didn't charge for it for ages. But like, but that was a huge risk. I think, in fact, I think they were much better off if they were trying to figure out the commercial side much sooner in order that, because at some stage you're going to need revenue growth. Like if you're bootstrapped, you'll need it earlier on. If you're a VC backed, you're still going to need it at some point or another. So and like figuring these lessons out is much easier when your team is tiny because you can just
Right.
change on a dime. Whereas when you have like, if you have like 100 people and you've got to raise tons of hype funding, you're going to be kind of screwed if your business turns out is wrong. So just having like being able to complete the business was quite a core focus for us over then the subsequent like year or so after that launch.
Is that also, I mean, is that why you now are kind of replicating that playbook where you go after new products that you launch are often in markets where there's billion-dollar competitors?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've realized it's easier for us to stand out and to compete than it is to build something from scratch that's never existed. So we can get there much more quickly. So for example, like we're building a messaging product at the moment that lets you send users an email or whatever. If a user signs up, send them an email, for example. We'll be able to make money off this product. And so we're not too fast. And
Yeah.
it fairly well defines a product. The difference in PostHog is it's in the same place as all your other tools. So you can reuse your cohort data from your product analytics, for example. We're also building some AI stuff, which is innovative. Like no one has built the equivalent, like we're building this like deep research thing that uses all of our tools together to automate a lot of the like higher level questions like, hey, why is my conversion rate dropped? And it will use our tools together to understand what's happening.
Mm,
That work is way more iterative and windy and stressful. Like it's like it's kind of feels zigzaggy. Whereas like these other products that have competition, it's like no, it's quite a lot clearer what we need to do, and we just need to go execute this particularly well. And the execution quality does matter probably a bit more if you're more competitive because like if your website's terrible and there's like an amazingly successful competitor doing the same thing as you, and your like sales approach is terrible and everything else, like
sure.
you're going to look like the company, you're just going to look really bad. Whereas, like, actually, if you come across some new problem that no one's ever heard before, they don't care if your website sucks, sort of thing. So, understanding the nature of like what style of problem am I solving, is it solved before or not, I think does influence like a lot of the ways I would initially get things out into users' hands.
Yeah. Now this goes also into your question, Jake. You previously said that the number one thing that you're optimizing for is shipping speed.
Yeah.
It's obviously much easier to do when you're smaller. Now you're 110 people. What are some of the things that you guys put in place, or what are some of the principles, levers, habits that help you maximize shipping speed?
Sure. Basically, trying to remove um, dependencies. So we have small teams. So we have like every product at PostDog has a small team. The teams are two to the median team size is probably two people, maybe three.
Uh-huh.
Very few people working on each product. There's just tons of them on the go at once. There's a few platform teams and a few other bits and pieces. So there are some, but what we're trying to do is basically like we don't want an engineer to have to go through any kind of process or to get any kind of approval to build something. We just want to go, hey, we blindly back you as a product engineer at PostHog, which means a traditional engineer builds stuff. A product engineer, in our view, decides what to build, ships it, and then understands and improves it. And we want them to go through the cycle. And so the way that looks internally is the teams are tiny. There's no approval needed. Like there's no formal roadmap given to engineers. There's no product requirements docs. There's just no product management that controls what they build at all. Um, there are no deadlines. And we don't hold people to account on goals either. The reason we have no deadlines, for example, is if you start building something and you get more information later on that you should be building something else, great, you should change. I don't want to hold you to account on what seemed relevant a month and a half ago because you should do what's best now with the most information possible. Likewise, with like deadlines and stuff, I think if you're like, okay, we're going to launch this on this particular day, and then we're going to back into it, you're like, it creates coordination where people are trying to get all their work ready on the same day. They do lots of meetings to talk about things that are in or out of scope, blah, 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 blah. None of this helps customers. Like customers don't care if it's on this day or if it's on some other day. And so instead it's like, no, just ship it. Like we're just not going to have any of these meetings or coordination at all. So like in marketing, at PostDog, you're like, oh crap, we've like built and shipped something. We now need to launch it, kind of thing. Or like maybe we heard it was coming, but like we won't have known which day it was on. So we just need to be all the other parts of PostDog react to what engineering is doing, which has worked really well. And like very low meetings and stuff as well. Like most engineers have, like empty calendars for 95% of the time, I would say.
Do you think that this approach with no product management, no product design, mostly product engineers just kind of deciding what to build and shipping it only works because you're building a product for developers by developers?
Um, uh, I think that helps, but like a lot of the tooling is now used by like not engineers. So for example, like marketing people will use our stuff, or support people will, or product managers will too. And like they're not really developers, but the thing that is important, I think, is the product strategy itself, determining our structure. So it's like, oh, we're building products that are actually quite well defined. Like I haven't had to tell you what a messaging product. I guess I actually did, but that's pretty dumb. You know what a messaging product would do? It would send messages. You roughly know what that would look like in the UX. Like there's going to be like the ability to send a message, the ability to like write emails and have templates and stuff, and like some kind of flow chart for like if this, then trigger this email, wait 2 days, send this other thing. I think because our roadmap is quite clear, because we're competing quite directly, it makes it easier to like know what to build. Whereas if, for example, it was like we're trying to invent some totally brand new, like some alternative to LLMs or something that's like
Yeah.
nuts, or like nuclear like fission fusion, which one it is. Like, okay, that's not where you want like a chaos. Like you don't want the kind of, it'll be too chaotic because it's not constrained enough a problem that each person, the problem of what to build isn't very constrained if it's way more open-ended what you could be building. So it's sort of like you can have this like, and that's why we're like engineering velocity is what we win on. If we're building something like a better phone, it will be a design-led thing. Like we should be optimized for like control, precision, quality of like, like perfectionism kind of thing is almost more what we lean to. So basically it's like, well, so that's why though. So it's like, I don't think we need, it's more that just we just care about velocity overall. There's a reasonably clear,
Yeah, I
way
do
obvious
still think like if
we
you're
can build.
building software for nurses, the
Yeah,
idea is that you have someone
yeah, yeah.
translating what a nurse cares
Um,
about and what she does day to day and how she operates to a developer who has no idea about that world
yeah.
and now
I don't
needs to
think that
build a
would work as
feature.
well. Yeah, like I think there it would be like the closer, yeah, definitely the closer you, I'm not going to deny it, like the closer you are to being a dev tool, the easier it is to do this.
Yeah,
Um, I think something for like a nurse or whatever, it would be like, okay, if it kind of requires a product manager who's a specialist in that industry to be able to tell you what to build, that's when you're not going to be able to have developers work like this. Sort of thing. So yeah, just but it's an advantage that we realized we could take with what we're doing. But like if you hire like ex-founders who are quite technical, like ex-technical founders, they will be quite broad across a lot of the SaaS tools that exist. Or like people will have like, or even if you're building a consumer product or something, like developers are also consumers. They will have used e-commerce websites, blah blah blah. So it's still fairly broad, I think, what you can get away with here.
so without deadlines and goals and all of that, how do you still evaluate performance, who you should keep, who you should not keep, type of thing?
Sure. When we're smaller, like up to maybe like 40 or 50 people, like we had a pretty good grip on what everyone was doing. Just my co-founder and I would know. And we're like, well, we just don't think this person's just not building anything. And we were very direct about it. Like we would tell people like, hey, this is our number one goal if we let someone go is that they see it coming, rather than they don't see it coming.
Hmm.
Tell them like, hey, this just isn't good enough, your work. You're not getting stuff out the door. Like maybe it's the environment, maybe it's because we're all remote, maybe it's like you actually need deadlines. And so it was just the two of us would just judge it. And we're fairly quick and transactional about it. Like we don't, I think a lot of companies will spend months managing, really stressing over people who just fundamentally aren't that invested in getting work done for whatever reason, which is valid, but just not a good idea for you as a business to employ them. We pay 4 months severance if we let someone go. So we tried to make it like, my reasoning was like, if we make it less painful from the other person's perspective, it makes it easier for us to just accept when we need to let someone go. Whereas if it's like only 2 weeks of notice or
Sure.
something, it's going to feel much harder to do this. And we're going to end up putting them on like a long performance program, which will probably take 3 months anyway, or 4 months anyway. So we may as well just pay it to them, bite the bullet, and just go for it. And it's been really strong performers really like working like this because it means they're not getting like pulled down by like, oh, this like having to redo other people's work, for example. And we're very transparent internally. Like if we let someone go, we'll tell the rest of the team why if it's for performance reasons, we'll tell them why
Mm.
we did it each time. So you do have to performance manage and you have to really look for intrinsically motivated people. And we're really upfront about this stuff with people when we interview them. It's a team, not a family. There's a really good book on this called No Rules Rules by the founder of Netflix that talks. I don't agree with everything about how they work, but this part I thought was quite interesting, where it's like you kind of pay people really well, like treat them like adults basically, but there just is a high expectation of performance from people in return.
So you previously gave the analogy that you're basically looking for people who notice when you need to vacuum the apartment.
Yeah.
I think you said hoovering. I didn't. Is that like a UK
I think it's
way of
UK. Yeah, I think it might be a British thing. I don't know really.
who notice when the apartment needs to be vacuumed or hoovered versus having to be told that it's time, and then they do it well and efficiently. What have you found are the easiest way to qualify for this or interview for this?
Yeah. So my co-founder does more of this part of the interview, but we'll look. Okay, there's a couple of things. I think one is a mindset thing of does this person feel in control of their life in general? Is an interesting like proxy for
Hmm,
this. So for example, I think it's also something that can lead to negativity. Is like it's. I think some people don't feel like they don't feel like they're responsible for anything, and thus they become kind of disillusioned and unhappy people as a result. Whereas I think how people tend to have more of a I have control over my life. I can do the things I want to do. So I'm sort of looking for like that's energy. Like the kind of questions I ask people are like, what is the biggest disappointment you've had in your career? from your education all the way through to today. And I don't care what the disappointment is. What I'm listening for is, do they start with, I did this thing, da, 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 or this company was toxic, sort of thing. And it's like, I'm listening for like, is the person taking accountability for mistakes they've made? Great.
Mm.
And like, it sort of shows that they feel like they have this control over things.
Yeah.
And then we'll also ask about ownership of projects. Like, hey, tell me about something you built. Whose idea was it in the first place? I was told to do this. Da, da, da. Is there anything that you chose to build instead? And so we'll just ask for this. So we'll look at both. There's like a psychological thing there, and then there's the like practical side of, have they worked somewhere where they've had some autonomy? And it may not be at work. Like it might just be like, yes, I work for some huge corporate that's like a bit old fashioned. I get told what to do, but I have this like cool side project that's quite impressive in some way, shape, or form. It might not have much traction, but I have like it's like a really well thought out thing. And we have and I've had some users and so on. So we're looking for evidence from that. It doesn't have to be like actually their day job. But we want to see it somewhere. Otherwise we're not confident enough that it will make sense. And there is a slight vibe as well of being like a little bit more extroverted and a little bit more better
Mm.
at communication than a stereotypical developer would be. Like if it feels like this person would be really uncomfortable in front of a user, we'll be hesitant to move forward. It doesn't necessarily mean a no, but if we really can't see that person being able to talk to a user, then we're less likely to move forward because they will need to do that at PostHog.
Don said you can hoover in a vacuum. You definitely have the genes for some shit posting, Don. Is this characteristic of agency, self-direction, like is that the core ingredient for a product engineer? If you're looking for someone who was not a product engineer previously, the senior.
Yeah, that and raw engineering talent is the other one, like speed for getting stuff done. If those two things happen, the person becomes good at product decisions, is what we've seen repeatedly. So it's not so much that I think some people, like I think in the early days, we look for like, does this person have product skill already? Like we're looking for how well they think through stuff they're building. And we just realized it doesn't matter. Like we actually think it's like I think some people I think there's like a failure mode of I have called myself a product engineer. I consider myself of like a more intellectual class now, where I consider what I'm building super carefully, and I go up to the top of a mountain and think about each feature for a week or two before I build it. You're just going to be wrong a lot because it's very hard, and so we don't. That's sort of like a bit holier than thou. Like I don't really want
Yeah,
to
yeah,
really want to think about doing the work for like too long. I think there is like a real midwit. I don't know if people know the midwit meme thing of like kind of idiot and genius do the same
yeah,
behavior, and then the middle one overthinks things. It's like
yeah.
I think some
Just
people
does
have this,
things.
and
Yeah.
we're like, it doesn't really matter. Like you can really overthink a lot of product decisions. It's like just try it because you will then clearly learn the lesson if it works or not. You won't learn a clear lesson ahead of time.
Given that people are self-directed, I'm assuming there's also no kind of criteria around how much a product engineer should talk to users, how often, how many hours, how many calls they should take.
No, there's none. It's encouraged. And like we'll call out good examples of this, but we won't be like, hey, it's this many calls per week or anything. Like there's no
What do you
process.
think is the average or the median? Like how much time per
It's
week?
very varied in all honesty. I think like some products that are more innovative products, it is more important to talk to users more frequently. So like our AI stuff, it's been extremely frequent. Like all the engineers in that team are doing multiple user interviews a week at the moment. I would say they go through phases. They'll have a week where they all go like, let's go nuts. And I think they did like 18 or 20 interviews in a week between like three.
Mm.
Then they'll have a few weeks of building stuff and they'll repeat that sort of cycle. In some of our more mature products, where there's like some of the work's just bigger. Like the chunks are like, okay, the infrastructure needs changing or something. So like it's not relevant at that stage as much. So it's very varied depending on the nature of what we're building. But generally, yeah, more innovative, earlier stage stuff that's less clear are all things that lead towards you need to talk to users much more frequently. If you're building something super clearly defined, you have complete confidence in for whatever reason, and perhaps it already has lots of users, you won't need it as much.
So I would say we work with a couple DevTool founders, and what I've definitely noticed is, and this is kudos to you guys, is PostHog is popular. Like people like PostHog the company, and people like PostHog the product. Um, Now, obviously, building a tool for developers by developer might help, but clearly there's a lot of DevTools that are not loved by developers.
Yeah.
What do you think is it about what you guys do that seems like you really managed to build a product that developers love?
Yeah, I think there's a few bits. Like I think and we think about this quite a lot. I think especially as we get bigger, it'll get super easy for people to hate us. I think like it's pretty easy to not be you have to be like particularly bad, I think, to like piss off developers when you're tiny. Like you're kind of lovable if you're like a 3-person startup or something in some way. I mean, unless you're like you can be idiotic in whatever, but like people will steer towards being quite kind towards you when you're small and encouraging. And when you get bigger is when it gets more, it gets harder. There are quite a lot. So one is just like first impressions really, really matter. And so we've built a cool website because I mean it's really quite fun to build a cool website, but also it's our tools take time and energy to set up, even if they're free. Like 97% of companies that install our tools don't pay anything, or something like that. It's a really high, and we have tons and tons of them, but it's a really high percentage pay nothing. But even that is not enough, just making it free to get usage. Like people don't want to waste like an hour setting up a tool that's broken or will send the data to the wrong place or do something stupid. And so things like getting the website right really, really counts. And this is an easy thing to do better than other people, because most people just copy paste. Like they'll use a template, which looks good quickly, but doesn't make you stand out. And we've been willing, like on the website, we're like, the challenge isn't polished, it is standing out from other people.
And I think you
And
also hire ex-developers for your marketing, right?
yeah. Yeah, we have like there's very few people with marketing experience in marketing at PostHog. Pretty much everyone is either an ex-developer or a journalist.
Mm.
Kind of like they're either really good at writing or they're pretty technical and also like writing. Like the job ads literally say things like developer who likes writing as the job title.
Hmm.
Which has really helped an awful lot. And so it's kind of we've just not been big on we haven't done any like we do have paid ads now and stuff, but like we really have prioritized we did a lot of content. We did like brand-based marketing and content marketing. I would say the main two. The big tip I would give on this in general though is in the early days, like why are people showing up? Like we literally don't I mean we have product market fit, which is sort of why we're getting towards it. And instead of kind of just like going, okay, let's start doing a bunch of marketing stuff, we just asked users, like, why did you turn up? And the majority of them were saying, I was recommended you. And then we went one level deeper and went, why were you recommended us? And there were just 4 reasons they gave us back. It was like all the tools in one. Nowadays it's all the tools in one, low pricing. Like we charge less for every product. Very technical support people to deal with, or like everyone's kind of technical at PostDoc that they deal with, so they don't feel like they're getting passed around that much. And develop a brand. And so we're like, cool, those 4 things are the 4 things we do to grow. Like we don't really do anything outside of them in any meaningful way. So it's like our marketing team shipped like a hardware project recently because they thought it was fun and like cool and would make it. And it went like it got on the front page of Hacker News. We sold like I think like 700 people signed up for one. And now we're getting all these feature requests and like, but they'll just do projects like this as opposed like they don't even they cost hardly anything to do compared to like paying to sponsor events or something. Where you're one of like 100 other companies that's struggling to find something that makes them stand out more, basically.
I mean, it kind of sounds like your growth strategy is hire people with high agency and then let them have fun.
Yeah, basically do stuff that they think is cool that would stand out. That's I mean, it just always will stand out if it's cool.
Yeah.
Who get developers like have like taste for what engineers like. And so like marketing is actually very hard to hire in a postdoc, like because I think a lot of marketing people do things that like developers are super against and very sensitive around, like using loads of tracking pixels and stuff. Like no consumer really cares, but developers really care about
Mm.
this stuff. And they'll see it happening and so on. So we'll make painful choices because of this. Like we have a web analytics product now, but we didn't have one for ages. So we had no Google Analytics or anything in the early days when we didn't have any, like we had hardly any of the features needed to track stuff. And so we're willing to like do the harder path. Like, no, we think it is not in brand interest to do this. So the same thing with like, we don't do retargeting. Like we don't put ads. Like if you visit PostDog, we don't show you ads because you visited our website. Again, because we just don't think it's the right thing to do from a brand perspective, even though it would generate better quality signups and stuff for us and help us commercially, probably in the short run. So we'll make quite hard choices. Also, lots of easy ones, like let's do these fun projects kind of thing.
Neo asked, do you guys see any ROI from the sponsored Theo videos? I actually don't know what he means by that.
Yeah, Theo's like the one exception. No, one exception actually. Like the way this happened was also kind of organic. Like Theo messaged us being like, "Hey, I like your products. I only want to work with companies that I really like."
Mm-hmm.
And then it just worked because I think he knew his own audience better. Whereas I think if we'd like tried to force him to do stuff with us, he would. So Theo's like a developer influencer. People don't know who he is. But I know full well how he would, knowing him now as a person, I know full well how he would react to like a competitor who's like more serious and less dev focused than us approaching him. So yeah, it kind of worked. I think it works, but I think it worked because he already liked us. And that's what our fundraising has been like. Like, for example, we did a Series D recently. And it happened basically because Patrick Collison, from who runs Stripe, sort of thought our website was cool. That's like the whole actual reason that really happened. And it's like you can kind of, I think it's like sort of like do the thing that's noteworthy or newsworthy. Don't chase the. I think it's a Paul Graham quote. It's like be the news, don't chase the news, and just have faith that like yes, you're not going to get it right every time. A lot of your projects will fall on deaf ears, but like if you do things that are remarkably good and cool, some of them will get traction on the internet. Like you can help them a little bit, but you should spend like 80% of your time trying to get the thing in a state where it's remarkable, and then like 20% on distribution, as opposed to like I think some people really go the other way around, and that seems to be the generic advice, but we found the opposite is true. Where it's, I think that might be a developer thing where developers are so anti-marketing that you kind of have to have the raw thing underneath to be in a cool state, sort of thing. But consumer is probably different, enterprise is probably different to this, but it depends on your market, perhaps.
I'm not sure how to phrase this question, but where do you get that mindset from? Because this idea of let's just do things and then believe that that will have an impact. Like let's just have fun on the website, do silly things, shit post on LinkedIn, and in conjunction, everything it kind of works out in the end
Yep.
to your favor. But a lot of founders don't think like that. Like they want to measure the ROI of the
Yep.
things that they do, and they want to see, like, explain to me why we should do this on the website in terms of like how it will impact our, I don't know, pipeline or user signups.
Yep.
And so they never prioritize these kind of intangible, qualitative things that in
Yep.
the end compound and do make a massive difference.
Yeah, so I think it's because it is exactly because like basically it's exactly because you can measure it that it gets saturated and you don't stand out, and that's bad marketing, in my opinion. So if you're doing stuff that everyone else is also able to do, then you are the same as everyone, and like people are looking for like if you want to have like a word of you can build a good business like that, I'm sure. I think if you want to if you feel like you're going to wind up with I think we've been able to build a business that grows through word of mouth because of this style of marketing. But if we were much more ROI focused, we wouldn't be growing through word of mouth. We would be growing because of like a carefully measured ad spend or something instead. And that's the competency, which is very different. Again, it's probably just like know who you are. And I was like, well, actually, I think for our audience, a really carefully measured like ad program or something is unlikely to ease, is going to be super hard way to get to like 100 million. I think it's more likely to go viral on the internet a bunch of times instead. Whereas there are other things where there are probably other people who are less averse to this stuff where this would work. Like I've run the business I bootstrapped was the other way around. It was all about ad spend. Like I could see to the second how much money we're making, for example. And PostHog is like the polar opposite. Our attribution is super hard and painful, and we don't really. We're working on trying to get like a rough sense of it, but yeah, I still haven't got a great process for this. I think probably in terms of marketing budget, we're going to start allocating like we're just willing to throw this percent of our revenue um, at brand marketing in general. We're looking at like impressions and things as well, but it's all a bit bullshitty, really. So yeah, it's scary because it's not you don't know how far it will scale, or how much it will scale, and what the ROI is going to be, or if it'll be profitable or not as an activity. So you kind of just have to have faith that like actually ultimately word of mouth is the cheapest marketing you can generate, is the most leverage, and it's very scalable because there's just like it's just people is a limiting factor there, and there are lots of humans on the earth. So if you're just willing to accept that, then they give yourself the freedom, it could work out pretty well. So I don't know. I think it would be nice if we could measure all this stuff better and more scalable, but then it also would mean none of these things worked. So
Well,
yeah,
and I mean, on the flip side, if you were able to measure everything and perfectly prove to the last cent that it makes sense, then everyone else would start doing it and then would stop working
yeah.
in some sense. Um, what has been out of, I think do you have 10 products now or something like that?
Yeah, it depends on how you define them. I have about 14, but some are in
14,
like
okay.
beta or
Which
alpha or whatever.
which one was the hardest to kind of compete with the incumbent?
That's a good question. Okay, so some of them have been much harder to build than others.
Mm.
There are pretty big variances in how difficult products are. So ones that are more infrastructure focused are much more of a nightmare to get out the door. Some have taken us by surprise. Like we actually built, well, like one of them we got wrong. For example, we built user surveys. This is a product that basically lets you put a pop-up into, like if you as a developer or a founder or whatever are using it, you can put a pop-up inside your product that's like, hey, what do you think of this new feature? Or
Kind
give
of
us
like intercom, but
yeah, and like very basic. And I think we saw Qualtrics is the biggest competitor
uh-huh.
for like, surveys, and they're very high evaluation like they're like a $5 or $10 billion company, and it looks slightly prehistoric what they're doing tech-wise. We're like, okay, this should be like an easy one. I'm kind of getting asked this by some of our enterprise customers, and we kind of just built it and promptly like didn't make much money off it. Like we got a reasonable level of traction, got hardly any revenue from it. We got enough traction that we can't drop it, but like I think we got a little bit arrogant where at this point we'd already shipped like a load of products that had all worked. And I think we didn't think about it very hard. We just kind of did it. And that was one bet where like it kind of worked, but like we're still trying to figure out like, hey, how do we either get this thing to have more traction or reprioritize where we're putting our energy and like maintain this whilst building something different, for example. So
Well, Jake just said, I love user surveys. I really like the NPS score.
yeah, so I'm kind of like we have usage like this, and I'm like, man, I don't want to get rid of it either. So it's a bit sticky, but like, that's one that we haven't got quite right. There are other products that have been hard. Like we have a data warehouse, which basically lets you like pull in your Stripe or Postgres data next to your product analytics. That's been the hardest to build.
Mm.
I would say, because it's got like loads of infrastructure. It's really complicated. We wanted like multi-tenant deployment. There are lots of like technical reasons why, and so we spent a lot of time. Like one of our engineers' first reactions to this was we can't like so in data warehousing, basically like get all your data in one place. The biggest competitor is Snowflake, which is a $55 billion company. So they're pretty big. And I think the engineer that was tasked with building this thing, he was like, I don't think we can compete with this company. That technology looks really complicated. They're kind of big and frightening, and they're very much the standard. And so what happened was we're like, well, imagine we forced you to build that. Walk me through how you would build it if I had like a gun to your head. And then within 10 minutes, he's like, oh, like this actually looks totally doable. Like we can just build it. And that's exactly what happened. So yeah, I think it took a long time. There's a lot of work that went into it, but that's worked really well. Like we've got like loads of like thousands of customers on it. And the customers that use it are taking us very seriously and they're very sticky and so on. So yeah, there's a lot of nuance by each product basically.
Have you seen any correlation between difficulty to build and stickiness?
Yeah, I think it's quite high. Yeah, like 'cause a lot of the ones that are hard to build are it's not necessarily causal, so just
Yeah.
be careful here. But the ones we built, they tend to be quite infrastructure-y type products, are generally harder to ship, and that means that people are like fundamentally putting lots of data or running parts of their business through you in production. So, for example, we have feature flags as a product that has really strong retention, because people's products like are dependent on our product to operate. And they're very hard to like pull out and change around and stuff. And the data
Yeah.
warehouse is kind of similar. Like it's their source of truth, it's going into like their board slides or their investor decks or whatever. So moving your reporting around from one tool to another is pretty painful. So yeah, they're harder to get adoption often though as well for the same reason. The retention's better, but they're also harder to get people onto in the first place.
Hmm.
So for example, we shipped a warehouse on day one of PostHog, probably no one would have used it because it's a quite high trust thing to do, like give us
Yeah.
access to literally all of your data. You probably wouldn't trust two founders to just do that. And I feature flags. I don't think you would. It'd be a
Maybe
bold.
two YC founders.
Maybe I was even still. Yeah,
Varun asked, what was your favorite feature to ship across all your products?
that's a good question. Like, which is your favorite child?
Yes.
You love some of them more than others. But you shouldn't admit it. Yeah, the AI stuff. I'm really excited. I'm the most excited about the change of what I think AI is going to let us deliver to customers over the next bit. Like it's not where we want to go and where it is today. There's a huge gap, but like that's the one like right now where I'm like, I just want to have like I just desperately want us to be further along than we are all of the time, and because it's just so exciting. And it's exciting because I think it represents us kind of doing something better than what exists
Mm.
today. Whereas our other tools are like, oh, I wish we had a CRM. That is going to be useful, but it's not like transformational for how work works. So getting into this style of work is really fun at this stage for sure.
Donna asked, similar to Sam's question, if the product engineers are all empowered to do new things, how do they know when those things aren't working or
Sure.
react when they're told it's not worth continuing?
This is kind of the role of product manager. Now we're a bit bigger. This is what product managers at PostDoc do. So they set context. They don't decide what to build. And so we do a growth review for every product.
How often?
Once a month for every product over 100K a year of revenue. This looks like a whole bunch of, we go through all the usage for a given product. So we'll look at like how many users signed up, how many activated successfully, like how many people are using like major features, how many companies are using it, like is usage retention good or bad, going up or down? We look at revenue, like new revenue, like expansion, contraction, churn. We go through feedback for the product as well. And if customers have churned, the product managers will really work to try and understand why they actually churned. So we'll put like surveys into the product if you like churn from PostHog, but they'll also do things like they'll look through our CRM, they'll like try and offer like gift cards to customers to tell us why they churned and stuff. Is very hard, but so we use this sort of session. The engineers will be involved in this session. It all gets shared internally as well. And off the back of it, you might be like, hey, you know what? Like, so to give you a tangible example, we have a session replay product. This lets you watch video clips of your
Hmm.
users. And we realized, like, we just had one of these growth reviews surface. Like, most of the time when someone gets past about $5,000 a month of spend on that product, they churn. And we're like, why? The growth review surface, this was basically happening. I'm like, it's great until you get past this certain size. And a lot of people were getting like surprised, will get like a shock bill, would panic and just take their card out of it.
Mm.
And they were getting value up until that happened. It might be because their product took off or they set us up in a way that was causing too many session replays to get captured. And so the team were like, you know what, we should, instead of building the feature we're supposed to be building, we will put a load of billing controls into the activation flow, which will reduce revenue in the short run because it means people can do things like set a billing limit. They can track only like 10% of recordings. They can only they can choose to track recordings only over 10 seconds long, for example, just to guarantee, to give them controls to let the customer configure, like decide what the value is they're getting out of these things. And so we shipped this. It meant that, yes, the order values declined for people going through this flow, but retention climbed, which offset the difference kind of thing. And because retention was more important to us, because as a company, we've set context like, hey, much more important to keep users on the platform and happy than it is to get as much money as we can today. Because there's going to be like another 20 products they might buy in the next like 5 years. So just like make sure we're looking after people nicely. And so that was like an example change that came off one of those sessions, but directly driven by just engineers hearing the problems that we're having.
So they kind of just coaches and I guess show them the truth. And then the developers still need to decide, okay, do I now
Yeah.
feel demotivated and abandoned? Do I now feel motivated to fix a bunch of stuff here?
Yeah. And then sometimes it's
Interesting.
like, yeah, this kind of sucks, but you know what? Like this thing we're working on will solve a whole category of other problems too. So, but yeah, it's just giving them, it is very much like this is the leveling exercise. Like, yeah, this is actually a complete train wreck or something. Or this is going great, like carry on sort of thing.
Akash asks, do your engineers vibe code these days? And if they do, has it worked out for better
Yeah.
or too many bugs?
It's actually really mixed. It's more mixed than you expect. Like we've got some engineers who are not using even any AI tools at all. I think what most developers at PostHog are using is, like for example, my co-founder uses Cursor, but in his own words, he uses Cursor to build an understanding of how things work, so that then he can ship code so he can more quickly build context up himself to then just go and build something more manually. He'll use like bits of like autocomplete and stuff, but won't say, hey, please build me a feature that does X, Y, Z. He does use it for big refactors, like because it can be kind of intimidating to figure out how to do an entire refactor across a big chunk of code that's a bit adventurous. But like most things are not like new products, things that are getting built are generally not, please like one shot me this whole new thing. It's sort of used in combination with quite a lot of manual. Like the developers need to sort of, I think at the level of scale we're at now, we do need to understand how our code works at a human level still. And so we use it to like accelerate that really, I think is what's happening.
Do you have
It's
any hard rules around usage?
no, this is also totally like do what you want. So we have like some people are using like Cursor, Windsurf, JetBrains, Klein, like VS Code by itself, Copilot. Like we don't dictate what people need to do here.
Yeah, interesting. We have 3 minutes left. What if a DevTool founder is currently raising or trying to raise or debating raising a seed round?
Yeah.
What are your some two tips or things you would tell
I
them?
think like be incredibly opinionated is probably the number one thing. Like, as in, be really, really certain of, like, basically just have an opinion on stuff. So, to give you an example, in our seed round, they were like, "What are you gonna do with the money?" And I was like, "Well, probably like build some stuff, figure out like do some revenue, like maybe do some sales as well, like bit of product, bit of sales, whatever." It's like very wishy-washy. And in the end, I was like, actually, I don't even think that's the right thing to do. Like, I think the right thing is like, no, we're not going to focus on revenue at all. I do not care. These are reasons we don't care. This is what we do need to focus on. There's not a single multi-billion-dollar company that focused on. There's not a single multi-billion-dollar open source company that did revenue in the first 5 years. At that time, it's
Mm.
now changed probably, but like that was the sort of response that like gets you a term sheet in the end. So you have to be kind of like sort of like that. And then the other side is like the level of ambition should be exceptionally high because like you're a VC-backed company, like you need like you might be building something small, but there needs to be like some ridiculous world that you're trying to get into that needs to be feasible. Kind of like you need to be able to like logically get to that point. A really good example is if you read like Tesla, like as a very ambitious company, they have a top secret master plan. Like just Google Tesla top secret master plan, and there's this really interesting document put together by Elon Musk, which is like a very like logically coherent but insanely ambitious document at the same time. And if you can get yourself to that sort of level where you can just rationally argue why this is going to be like a Microsoft competitor one day or something, you'll be able to fundraise basically. The other one is like you do need like you can get there from cold, but like introductions in practice are what's worked for us, and introductions have come from angel investors. I think a lot of people waste lots of time trying to do like cold outbound to investors, which I think is like generally losing exercise. Oh, sorry, my last one is like fundraise from West Coast US based investors. I like totally would focus there. Valuation will be there's so much. It's like a whole world apart from
Hmm.
everywhere else, in my experience at least.
Hmm.
Like whatever you do, like go be as like they will see the world as like the tech world as being like West Coast centric. So if you're not sort of like if you don't have, I would very much go to like I would go to San Francisco and like make it happen there would be my other big thing. I think if it comes across like you're trying to get like oh, I'm just trying to do this thing in the UK or something, it's not you're not shooting for the biggest possible market basically. So you have to be like we're going to be number one. You can't seem like an iterative company, which is what I mean by like if you're bootstrapping or VC back, like know what you're doing and then
Yeah.
just like into it as hard as you can. And actually, if you do lean into it this way, it kind of works out because you can raise enough to do the ridiculous thing you said you would. But if you don't, you won't sort of thing.
There you go. Okay, well, we're at the 1 hour mark. James, thank you so much for your time. I know that there's a bunch of questions in the chat that I did not ask. Maybe next time we'll get through them. Appreciate you taking the time, James. If anyone joined late, I'll paste here the link. It will get posted there next week or something like that. That's it, James. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, it's lovely. Thanks for all the questions and stuff too from everyone. And thanks for having
Cool.
me on the show. And yeah, just shoot me an email or whatever, or I'm just on Twitter or whatever if you
Cool.
want to ask anything else.
There you go, guys.